Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Torah studies, Parsha of Tazria and Metzora. We have two parshas together this week. Today, Good Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Today was the second day of Rosh Chodesh, which means tonight now is already the second day of Iyar. Today was the first day of Iyar. The second day of Iyar is the birthday of the fourth Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe Maharash. It is in Sfiras HaOmer, it is Tiferes Shebetiferes. I'm going to talk about mention a little bit about it. And the topic of discussion today is the treasure of words, transforming harmful speech into hidden gems of the soul. You know, we're talking about gossip, the negative speech that sometimes seems very harmless. In the Torah tells us how Lashon Hara, talking negative, talking gossip, is a very, very harmful thing. And sometimes you don't feel how harmful it is. You start talking and gossiping, and before you know it, you end up talking negative about people. You can lose friends because of that, family members. You start feeling bad. And it is connected with this week's Torah portion. In the Torah, we read about the negaim, the leprosies. The Torah talks about different types of these lesions that comes on the skin of the person, or on the clothing, or on the houses. And all of this, the Talmud tells us, comes as a result of talking Lashon Hara. Now, when a person talks bad, negative about other people, he causes separation between people. And because of that, the Torah says that the person needs to be secluded and separated in order for him or her to take this thing seriously and do teshuvah and come back together. What is interesting is that this is something we find in the negaim, that this kind of lesions, both as we said, on the skin or on the clothing or on the houses. What we're gonna focus today is more about the negaim and the houses, because we find something very interesting about this type of negaim, and that is that the negaim, the lesions and the houses, has also a blessing in disguise. So let's see inside. And we're going to talk about also how do we deal with this? You know, when we have this problem of talking bad, how do we avoid? How do we fix this? What's the best way, the most effective way to avoid gossip? So we're going to be talking also about the Rashi. In the beginning of the portion, it says, "Ki tavo'u el eretz Canaan, asher ani noten lachem la'achuza, v'natati nega tzaraat bebeit eret achuzazchem." When you come to the land of Canaan, which I am giving you as a possession, I will place a legion of tzaraat on the house in the land of your possession. Now, the Torah goes on. We're not going to read everything. I just want to summarize it, what the Torah says here, that basically when there is a stain, a white stain on the house, you got to call the Kohen. The Kohen has to see it, he has to look at it. and to see if he has the colors and the signs of what is considered a nega. Then you have to remove, we have to seclude it for a week, and then he has to come back, and if it doesn't change, he has to remove these stones, and if it's still if it returns, then he has to destroy the whole house. Okay. So this is, as we said, is what came because of what? It came because of the Lashon Hara. It came because of Lashon Hara. However, as I said before, interestingly, we find that there is a blessing in disguise. Rashi points out, he says, the Torah tells us, when you come to the land of Canaan, v'natati nega tzaraat, and I will place this lesion of tzaraat. Hashem says, as we read in, Hashem says, I will place a lesion of tzaraat on the house. It sounds like Hashem is telling us guess what's going to happen? There's some good news. When you will come to enter the land of Israel, you will find the lesions. I will place the lesions. So that needs explanation. What is it? Why does the Torah tell us in that way, as if it's some great news? Hashem says, "Oh, you come to the land. I will place the lesion in the houses." So here, let's say what Rashi says. It says Rashi as follows: "V'natati nega tzaraat besurai lehem," and I will place a lesion of tzaraat, says Rashi. The notification that they will be struck by lesion is a happy tiding. It's good news. This is because the Amorites concealed treasures of gold in the walls of their homes. For the 40 years, the Jews were in the desert, and when homeowners demolished their homes due to the lesions, they found the treasure. Okay? So that means, says Rashi, that's the good news. That for 40 years, since the Jews left Egypt until they came into the land of Israel, the Amorites is one of the 7 nations there that occupied the land of Israel, and the Jews needed to take over. And they kept, for 40 years, they kept hiding gold in the walls because they knew the Jews are coming. So they hid the gold in the walls. And that's why Hashem made that they should have the lesions in the walls. In this way, they find the gold. It's like, in Fiddler on the Roof, Tuvia said, if money is a curse, smite me with it. So, however, we need to understand here in what Rashi is saying here. So Rashi says that the Amorites hid the gold, right? Why only Amorites? What about the other nations? And why for 40 years? Why did they hid for straight 40 years? What is interesting, this Rashi, where is the source of this Rashi? It is a Medrash. And the Medrash says it differently. The Medrash says as follows. The passage states, and I will place a lesion of tzaraat. Rabbi Chia asked, is being struck by a lesion a good tithing? So he's asking the same question that Rashi is bothered by. Why does the Torah says, "V'natati negav tzaraat," and I will give the lesion of tzaraat as if it is good news? And indeed, the Medrash answers. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Yochai, explains, when the Canaanites heard that the Jews were coming to Israel, they hid their money in the houses and the fields. And God said, I promised their ancestors that I would bring their descendants into the land filled with goods, as it is written, Ubatim meleim kol tuv, and houses filled with all goodness. So what did God do? He afflicted the houses with lesions, and when the owner demolished the house, he found a treasure. And then the Medrash goes on to say, but who told the Canaanites that the Jews were about to enter the land? So Rabbi Ishmael, the son of Rabbi Nachman, answered, Yeshua sent 3 letters of warning. Before Yeshua entered the land of Israel, he sent them 3 letters. He gave them basically 3 choices for the nations that were there. It says, A, if you want to vacate the land, vacate. Sounds like Trump, right? Go. You can go wherever you like to go. B, if you want to make peace with us, sue for peace. And of course, there's the rules of how we're allowed to have peace with them. And C, if you want to make war, come make war. That's what Yeshua sent a letter to the people. Now this, keep in mind, when was that? That took place 40 years after. Okay, so now what do we see from here? We have the Medrash that talks about the Canaanites. It doesn't mention the Amorites. Canaanites is the general name to all of the nations, the land of Canaan. Rashi says the Amorites were hiding the treasures. The Medrash, which is the source of Rashi, it says the Canaanites. Why did Rashi change? Why does it say the Amorites instead of the Canaanites? Excuse me. And the other thing is the Medrash talks about when did they find out? When did they find out? And the Medrash says they found out before the Jews entered the land. It means when Yeshua was about to conquer the land, he sent them the letter and gave them the options what to do. You can either run or make peace or make war, up to you. They, of course, chose war. Now, but Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says that for 40 years, the Amorites, first of all, it's not Canaanites, it's the Amorites, and for 40 years, they hid the treasures for 40 years. Okay? How did they know 40 years earlier to hide the treasures? So the Rebbe speaks about it, and the Rebbe explains as follows. The Rebbe says, basically, we know Rashi does not, when he gives us the explanation, he relies on the previous verses in the Torah that he already explained. And when we go back to the Torah that talks about the Jews leaving Egypt, the splitting of the sea, there the Torah says that Shamu Amim Ergazu, the older nations, they heard and they trembled. They found out that the Jews are coming. They found out about the great miracles. The Jews were a nation of slaves, and they won. They were victorious over the great empire, the Egyptian empire, and they came out with all the miracles, with the splitting of the sea. So the nation trembled, and they knew that they're coming for them. So that was 40 years earlier. And that's why Rashi does mention that this happened. This happened when they came in. That 40 years later, that when they heard, it happened in the beginning. The Amorites kept hiding for 40 years because they knew that the Jews are coming. Now, let's let's see it inside. So they knew it. Says Rashi. The Torah says, then the chieftains of Edom were startled and trembling seized the powerful men of Moab. All inhabitants of Canaan melted. They knew that the Jews are coming, so they were afraid. They were afraid what's going to happen. As Rashi says, they said the Jews are coming upon us to annihilate us and to take possessions of our land. So then what happened? If they were afraid then, why does the Medrash tell us that only later on they hid, only when Yeshua sent them the letters? So the Rebbe explains that really what happened was that when the Jews left Egypt, they were all afraid. However, they realized what happened. The Jews were supposed to come right away. From leaving Egypt, they were supposed to enter right away to the land. And they knew it. The nations of the world, they knew it. They knew what happened with the promise that God promised the land to the Jewish people, to Abraham and his children. And they knew that the Jews are coming. But then the Jews left, and a week passes, 2 weeks, a month passes, and the Jews are not coming. So basically, they decided the nation started to use their possessions until they finally found out when Yeshua sent them the letter 40 years later. Then, okay, now they realized this is serious business. So they went and they hid the treasures. Now, I want to ask you a question. Think about it. What is the point of hiding the treasures? If they know they are the enemies, the Jews are coming, what's the point of hiding the treasures? Either take it with you or, I don't know, use it, do something. What's the point of hiding the treasures? If you hide the treasures and the Jews are coming. So here the Rebbe is going to explain something very, very interesting. And the Rebbe says that there is a difference between the Amorites and the other nations. And there is a reason why Rashi chooses and says the Amorites. And he explains as follows. I'm going to say it in short, and then we're going to see inside. Basically, it says that the nations of the world, the nation not of the world, the nations that were there inhabiting the land of Israel, they came and they knew that the Jews are coming, so they went and they were hiding. But then the Jews, the time went by, 40 years, and they're not coming. And then finally, Yeshua sends them a message. And the message was, you can either run or you can make peace or you can make war. So they figured he didn't tell us. Now, he didn't say basically that there's no options. There's options also of make peace. So they figured maybe they, even though they decided to make war, but they thought maybe they're going to eventually make peace and they'll come back to their homes and they'll find the treasures. So that's why they were hiding the treasures. Well, that wasn't the deal. The deal was if they make peace to begin with, before they decide to make war, then they can stay. And that's how Hashem made that the Jewish people should end up finding their treasures, and this is why the legions came into the houses and they were able to find the treasures. Now, what about the Amorites? The Amorites were something different. So let's see the inside. So once they saw that the Jews were delayed for a protracted period in the desert, they had no reason to keep their money hidden. They would not worry about it until it became clear that the Jews were about to enter the land. And that answers Rashi. All the nations who had resided in Israel 40 years earlier had buried their treasures at that time. However, when the Jews arrived, the Jews' arrival was delayed. All the nation, besides for the Amorite, and we'll soon see why the Amorites are different, all the nations reclaimed and enjoyed their wealth. But the Amorites were something different. Why? So again, this Rashi relies on the fact that we learned earlier in the Torah, when we learned about when God said to Abraham about the Brit Bein HaBetarim, the covenant, when Hashem promised Abraham that your children, they will suffer for 400 years in a strange land, but eventually they're going to come out with a big fortune and they will come and inherit the land that I promised. However, God said to Abraham that it's going to take some time. So he told them, "V'dor revihi yashuvu hena." The fourth generation will return here. Why? For the iniquity of the Amorites will not be complete until then. What does that mean? Basically, what Hashem is telling Abraham, there are 7 nations there. And those nations will be eliminated and will be removed, and the Jewish people will enter there instead. And the reason why they are being removed is because of their sins. However, the sin will not be fulfilled, will not be complete until the 4th generation. It will take time until the Amorites their sin will be complete. That means that they got it up to the top, their sins, and at that point, the Jews are then supposed to take over. So Hashem said to Avram that this will take 4 generations. So the Jews needed to wait to enter the land because the nations living there still had 4 generations of merit left before they became unworthy. And as Rashi explains, Ki lo shalem avon Amori, for the iniquity of the Amorites will not be complete, they will not deserve to be sent out of the land until then. This is because God does not punish a nation until its measure is full. The measure of their sin is full. This is when God punishes them. So what happened? And that is the difference between the Amorites and the other nations. The Amorites nation, the Amorite nations, their sin was complete at that time. The Jews left Egypt. There, the Amorites were already up until the top. The Jews were then able to take over the Amorites. It took them 40 years later, but the Amorites already, in their nation, they were ready to be taken over. The Amorites ran out of merit first and were therefore conquered first. The Amorites, in fact, were not only in the land of Israel, the Amorites were also, and perhaps mainly, on the east bank. We have the west bank and the east bank. On the east bank of the Jordan River, where Moshe Rabbeinu fought the Sichon Melech HaAmori, the king of Amorites. So the Amorites, they knew from the beginning that they are ready to be taken over. And that's why for 40 years, they trembled. And as Rabbi David Pardo, the Maskil of David says, the measure of the Amorites filled before the others. This is why Moses captured their land while the other nations were not conquered until later in Yeshua's reign, in the time of Yeshua. And now we need to understand the deeper meaning of all of this. So as we said before, so again, to summarize what we learned, we're saying what the Rashi says about the legions that will happen when the Jews came to the land of Israel. They will find stains in the houses. And Rashi explains that this is the houses of the Amorites, because for 40 years they were hiding the treasures, and that was good news for the Jews, that they will be able to find the treasures when they have to destroy the houses. But yet, as you remember in the beginning, we said that after all, this was a result of not a good thing. What led to the lesions and the skin and the clothing and the houses? It was the lashon hara, the speaking bad, the evil talk, the evil speech. What led to it? So how do you reconcile this? Is it the evil speech? It is a punishment, or is it the reward? What's going on over here? So we're going to see how the Maimonides, the Rambam, he explains regarding this, what the Torah talks about the lashon hara, and as a result, the punishment of the lesions. Says the Rambam, says the Maimonides, it says the change that affected clothes and houses, which the Torah describes with the general name tzaraat, is not a natural occurrence. Instead, it is a sign and a wonder prevalent among the Jewish people to warn them against lashon hara, sinful speech. Tzaraat isolates the gossiper, making it known that they must remain alone to abstain from the conversations of the wicked, which are folly and harmful speech. What the Rambam is telling us, you see, rarely do people assemble deliberately to mock others. When you get together, it's not normal to sit down and together with friends, and the purpose is to go to talk against other people. That's a very rare thing. Almost always it happens unintentionally. What does it mean? You start talking. You're talking nonsense, and you have empty talk. Then something creeps in. You start talking. You have nothing to talk about. You start talking about this. What the color of clothing is he wearing? What is this? What did he do yesterday? And like this, it leads to the person to start speaking Lashon Hara. As the Rambam continues, this is the path that is followed by the gathering of wicked fools. They begin by speaking excessively about empty matters. Then they come to speak negatively of the righteous. Finally, they become accustomed to speaking against the prophets and casting aspersions on their words. Thus, the speech of the wicked is caused by loitering on the street corners, frequenting assemblies of commoners, and spending time at the parties of drunkards. So the conversation starts innocently enough, but because it is empty speech, it often leads to sinful speech. And that's what King Solomon says in the Proverbs. It says, sin is unavoidable when there are many words. Thus, the wise seal the lips. When you have a conversation, when your conversation is aimed at a goal, so it's much less likely to lead into a negative speech. But when there is no goal, it is just idle talk, just nonsense, it is very likely to end up with evil speech, with negative speech. And why is it? So there's actually two reasons. There's two reasons for this. One is a natural reason, and the other is a mystical reason. The natural reason is very simple. The mind is like a vacuum. You can't stop thinking. So if your mind is occupied speaking positive thoughts or thinking positive thoughts, and therefore speaking positive thoughts, then it is used in a positive way. But if it doesn't, the mind needs to be filled up. It's like a vacuum. If it's not filled up with the positive thoughts, it's going to be filled up with negative thoughts. And this is what the Rebbe says in Hayom Yom, the famous book the Rebbe wrote every day, a little message. There's a lot of brilliant messages there. You should read it every day. So the message for the 16th day of Cheshvan, the Rebbe says as follows: thought is a vehicle and servant of intellect and emotions. It says it's lavush. Thought is considered like a garment, a lavush. It's a vehicle and a servant for the intellect and emotions. Even when it does not serve intellect or feelings, it continues to function. It continues to think and meditate. However, this activity is not only devoid of content, but also open to depravity. It is explained that alien or evil thoughts are caused by the mind's emptiness. When the mind is occupied, the thought has something to serve. And there is no room for stupid and vain thoughts, devoid of substance. So that's the natural reason of why the empty thoughts, the emptiness, leads to negative thoughts. Idle speech. When the mind is empty of directed thought, it fills with meaningless thoughts, which leads to idle speech. So basically, a mind that is unguided becomes misguided. If you're not guiding your mind in a positive direction, it will easily become misguided and have negative thoughts. So that's the natural reason. That's the natural reason of why the emptiness leads to the negative. Then there is also the mystical reason. And here is where it is connected, where the Rebbe connects it to this nation of the Emori, the Amorites. You see, the Jewish people were commanded to conquer the land of the 7 nations. And Hasidus explains a lot that the conquering the land of the 7 nations represents conquering the 7 emotive attributes. We're now in the days of the Sephiras HaOmer. They're counting 49 days from Passover till Shavuot. And of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept that these 7 times 7, the 7 weeks, represent 7 different emotive attributes, which means that every day, every week, we perfect another attribute, and every day of the week is another aspect of that attribute. We didn't count tonight yet the Omer, so I'm not allowed to say what is the count. And but the attributes I am allowed to say of tonight, which is the Rebbe Rashab, the attributes that is tonight is Tiferet Shebetiferet. Last night we counted 16 days, which was 2 weeks and 2 days. The attributes was Gevura of Tiferes. Tonight we count Tiferet Shebetiferet. Now, again, each attribute represents a different emotive attribute. Chesed is kindness. Kindness can be used in a positive way, can be used in a negative way. Kindness is it is a positive thing. It seems like a positive thing, but can be used negatively. If you let your child watch television all night, seems like an act of kindness to the child, but it's not a good thing. So there is certain nations that they represent the chesed, the kindness, the attributes of giving. But if it's not used in a proper way, it can be a negative thing. And our job is to transform it. Same thing as the Gevura. The Emori, the nation of Emori, represents speech, which in this context is also connected with the attribute of Tiferet, the beauty, which is a combination of Chesed and Gevura. It is something that is rooted very deep. It is in the central line, and we're not going into explaining all of these Kabbalistic terms, but the point I'm trying to bring out is that every negative trait has a root. It is rooted in the klipa, in the other side, the unholy side. Our job is to take it and to transform it. When you take it and you transform it, and you use it in a positive way, you can find the good that is hidden right there. So the nations of Emori they represent the concept of speech. And speech, talking, speaking, idle talk, talking nonsense, talking gossip, when you have all of these things, it brings out the negativity. And that is something you have to avoid. And the way to avoid it is, number one, you realize you gotta stay silent. Sometimes silence, they say, silent is gold. Avoiding problems. But then there is also the next step of transforming it. And that's what the Rebbe wants to bring out here. Let's see inside what the Rebbe says. Rabbi Bachya talks about Avona and Mori, what we're talking before, that the sin of the nations, the nation of the Amorite nation, that Hashem said it's going to take the fourth generation to complete their sin. It says the word Amori is Avon Ha'amira. The sin of the Amorite is the sin of Amira, which means speech. It's the same root, Amar, which means speech, saying. And that is the mystical reason of this idle speech. The Amorite Kalipa fuels sinful speech, but can only enter our minds when we grant it access, by allowing it aimless thoughts. These thoughts result in sinful speech. The way the Alter Rebbe puts it, the Emory represents aimless chatter and foreign thoughts in Israel. Speaking too many words indicates stupidity. That brings a quote from the Zohar. The Emory represents energy that hails from the wrong side, the side of impure energies that disturb Israel. The Emory do not merely drive us to aimless talk, they also drive us to foreign thoughts. All speech begins in the heart. The mind thinking mindless thoughts that are foreign to Jews because they don't belong to God. The word Emori, which is in the current tense, implies constancy. It refers to an impure energy that drives us to constant chatter. The ancient insane king, Melech Zaken Exil, as is referred to the Yetzer Hara, it traps us into thinking foreign thoughts and speaking empty words, for sin is the inevitable companion of too many words. So we must remove this power from the Emory by deliberately avoiding foreign thoughts and empty words. Instead, we must constantly think godly words. So that's why the sages, they said, don't talk too much, stay silent. Our sages promoted silence and warned against excessive speech. That excessive speech leads to empty chatter, which becomes negative chatter. And this comes from the Mishnah Pirkei Avot that we just read last Shabbos. It says, Shimon, the son of Gamliel, said, he would say, I was raised among Torah scholars all my life, and I have found nothing better for the body than silence. Speech is not essential. Deed is critical. Those who speak excessively bring on sin. So the advice number one, when it comes to not to talk gossip, is stay silent. Don't talk too much. And as it says in the Talmud, it says when Rabbi Dimer arrived in Babylon, he said that in the West, which was in Israel, They say a word for 1 coin, silence for 2 coins. I once heard from someone who liked to talk a lot. He said, the Talmud tells us a word for 1 coin, silence for 2 coins. So if you stay silent, you get only 2 coins. But if you keep talking, every word is a coin, so it adds up a lot. But obviously that is not the meaning of this Talmud. It means probably avoiding every word of avoiding is worth double than saying that word. So that is one way of dealing with this. But of course, as we said before, there is also, this is the way of iskafia and isapcha. You can avoid doing bad, but you can also transform the negative into a positive. As the Maimonides concludes there, that in contrast, the speech of proper Jewish people is always focused on words of Torah and wisdom. Therefore, God assists in their endeavor and grants them merit because of it. So yes, silence will neutralize the Emori, but then there is a better advice, and that is when you have a gathering, when you have two people sitting together, don't stay silent, but talk positively. Talk words of Torah. Because again, this is taking the Amorite and transforming it. That is why the Torah says, as the Rebbe explains, that the Amorite, which represent that nation, the nation that represents the negativity of speech, the Torah says, right in their houses, you will find treasures of gold. Why? Because the speech, the negative speech that they are guilty of, when that is transformed, instead of talking negatively, you will use the time and talking positive. You talk about Torah, talk about mitzvahs, talk about how to help people. That will transform the klipa of the Amorite. That's what the Rebbe concludes here. Conversely, the hidden treasure of gold were found uniquely in the Amorite homes. This is because the ultimate purpose of the tzaraat lesion was not merely to neutralize and prevent the chatter of the wicked, rather it was to transform the human power of speech. Rather than negative speech, we should have words and conversation about holy topics. As Yaakov said, I snatched it from the Amorites. It is the story with Shechem. Yaakov said to his children, he said to Yosef, I gave you Shechem over your brothers, that I snatched it from the Amorites. He told them, Becharbi ubekashti, with my sword and with my bow. And the Targum, the translation there is Bitzloti ubebauti, with my prayers and my requests. That means that Yaakov himself already said, how did he fight the Amorite? He fought it with words of prayer, words of Kedusha. Says the Rebbe, words and speech that are good and holy reveal the hidden treasures of the soul. So there we have it. What is the lesson here? Is the power that we have. And that is why Hashem said, we asked the question, on the one hand, it is an affliction for talking bad, and then there is a reward of finding the treasure. Yes, because when we take that negative trait of talking bad and we do teshuvah, And we not only do teshuvah, but we transform the power that we have, the power of speech, in order to spend it on good things, on positive thoughts. We're able to change the world, and we're able to find the gold that is hidden inside the soul. Just to conclude with a story that happened, I think it was 2019. The story starts with 1982 in the war, the first war in Lebanon. And it was a terrible, terrible battle that a lot of Israeli soldiers were killed. It's called the Sultan Yaakov. And one of the soldiers that was killed was taken by the Lebanese or the Syrian, whoever it was then. His name was Zecharia Bauma. And 2019, so it was there was a time that Israel notified Russia about a certain terrorist attack that the Mossad found out that the terrorists wanted to attack in Russia, and they told it to the Russians, and they were saved. And Putin wanted to reward, and he asked Netanyahu what he would like. And Netanyahu told him about the giving. He wants to get the remains of this soldier Zecharia Baumel, because the Russians were then into Syria and figured they were able to get out the remains of this soldier. And indeed he did it. And Netanyahu called the family, and the family came and they thanked Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they told him, I think it was the mother that told the Prime Minister that for many years they harbored bad feeling and bad thoughts about Netanyahu, that he's not doing enough, doesn't care enough about their son, and so on. And then she said, at one point, we decided to change. We decided to think positive. Enough with the negative thoughts. And they decided to think positive. We're sure that he's doing what he needs to do. There's so many things that we don't know about, and so on and so forth. And she told it to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, when she said it to him, he was visibly shaken. And he told her, I want to tell you what happened. It says, when we went and we told the Russians that Putin asked me what I would like, there was a list of maybe 50 things that I wanted. But for some reason, all of a sudden, that thought came to my mind. I got to tell him. I got to tell him about Zecharia Baumel. And he said it to him. And Putin was very surprised. Why you ask him something so small? I mean, this is a dead person and this and that. So he said, by us, it's important to have our dead, to bury our dead, to respect our dead. Jewish people, it is important to us. And when Putin heard that, he says, well, I'm very impressed. You're so respectful about with your human life, even the dead people. He says, that's where this one is on me, and then you can pick something else. So here was the positive thoughts that changed. You have a thought, when you think about someone, you think positively about someone, we have no idea how the positive effect that this has. the positive effect is so far-reaching. It says evil thought, it says kills 3. Lashon hara, katliat lesoet, kills 3 people. The one who talks, and the one who listens, and the one you speak about. So we can understand the one who talks and the one who listens, they're both involved in negative things. What about the other person that you think about? Why does this affect him? And the Rebbe explains is because positive, I said positive, so I said the negative speech when you speak about someone. Because when you speak negatively about something, it brings out the hidden, that what is hiding deep inside. If you're going to speak positive about someone, you're going to bring out the positive from the person. You're going to speak negative about someone, you're going to bring out the negative. So this is the lesson that the Rebbe tells us from this Rashi, the fact that Rashi picks the Amorites. Rashi always, we know, is hidden in his words of the mystical part of the Torah. It is because the Amorites, they represent the speech, which can be negative, and we have to turn it into positive. So we're turning this, and this, by the way, it's an Hashgacha Pratis. We learn it tonight, which is Tiferet Shebet Tiferet, and that is connected with positive speech. Tiferet is the attribute of Emori, the speech that we need to transform. So may Hashem help us that we should be able to transform all the negativity into positivity. Okay, so thank you for joining. Any questions? Let's see, Tanya wrote, it is difficult to accept that Hashem sent tzaraat to punish. This seems like an old perception of how people understand disease. That it was sent to punish. Is there a more modern interpretation of this? So we have to understand it wasn't a medical condition. Our sages tell us that the condition was a spiritual condition. Of course, if it was a medical condition, it wouldn't make sense that it would come on the clothing and the houses also. So obviously, it was a spiritual condition that affected the people, and it seemed like a leprosy, but it wasn't a actual medical condition. So yeah, tzaraat is translated as leprosy, but it's not the actual medical leprosy. Any other questions?
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, all the best.